Welcome back. Well, joining us now to talk about how all of these things are playing out, Professor Tunde Adeniran OFR, former Minister of Education and former Nigerian ambassador to Germany. He's also a professor of political science. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, haven't seen how...
Chamberlain.
Yes, haven't seen how all of these things are playing out. Well, definitely you have kept tabs on the events as they unfolded. What concerns do you have?
I have very, very serious concerns because the NSAS has come more or less as an elastic metaphor for so much that have been wrong in our system, in our society. It has come for us as a nation and as a people to be a part of the wages of the sins of commission and omission that we have had in the past. What is worrisome, which has deepened my concern, is not because it has come and has happened, but because of part of the reaction. Because it has seen, through it, we have been able to see the manifestation of some of the worst instincts in us as a people and as a nation. But the reactions to it have more or less made one to wonder whether we will ever learn, because it has happened, it is terrible, but our reaction to it, I believe we should really identify the real causes to be able to solve the problem. Looking ahead, it is a lesson for the future. But the reactions have shown that people have been rationalizing so many things. We've been attributing certain things to it. Yes, it is a result of frustration. Yes, it has been caused over the years by certain factors, certain things that were done, and some things that were not undone. But the real fundamental causes, we have been parrying over it. People talk about, oh yes, now give them palliatives when they have the palliatives that will solve the problem. You give palliatives. What type of palliatives? Those palliatives, within days, may be exhausted. But there are more fundamental palliatives that we have avoided over the years. What we are facing, the crisis that we are facing in this country, is an ideological one. I have said it over and over, that when we have, for instance, take the way the demonstrations went, you will feel proud that Nigerian youths are educated enough, they know what they wanted, they know how to organize themselves, and their future, that the future of this country will be guaranteed. But at the same time, you see how it ended, hijacked, and that is why we keep saying that the people, when you educate some people either in Port Harcourt or in Onitsha or Zaria or wherever, those who left uneducated either in Lokoja, in Makurdi, wherever, those people will become stumbling blocks. They are going to be sources of danger to those that will give education. The real issue is this. This country, the social capital investment, the social investment has been avoided. If we do not educate our people, make education compulsory and, of course, free up to the secondary level, we are wasting our time. And not just the type of education, ordinary education that will train them to be very good citizens, to be able to equip themselves, to know the values of life, the values of patriotism, and the values of their self-worth as individuals. Indeed, we've seen so many things that have happened. Now, when we reduce them for the fundamentals, take them one by one, we will realize that to many of those who hijacked the demonstrations, life has meant nothing to them. Individuals they see on the road are just figures. The properties that are being burnt mean nothing to them. They do not see them as their own property. They do not identify. And the brothers that they face, the sisters that they face, and so forth, and do maximum harm, do not mean anything to them. Because the psyche, we have become a nation that is so much against itself. The wickedness is unheard of, is unimaginable. But you cannot just now rationalize this, and of course some people even made efforts as trying to ethnicize or to religionize and so on. These are not the way to solve it. We have to go back to the fundamentals and make sure that indeed we are in trouble in this country. And unless we solve these problems, we are going nowhere. Many have argued that, okay, oh yes, the youths, we need to give them opportunity to serve and so forth. Go back to the First Republic. You see that during the First Republic, it all started, you have the Enahoros, you have the Umbus and so on. They are in their 20s when they were in service, when they were in government, when they were in leadership positions. You go to the Second Republic, Patu Tomi, Abubakar, Fari, and so many others, you can identify them who are in their early 30s and so forth, holding key positions. And of course, up to the recent time, the present regime, the present republic, you see that you still have quite a number of youth that are there. That is not the issue. There are more fundamental issues. You can take some examples. Rotimi Amici, at 33, was Speaker of the Rivers State Assembly. At 41, he was governor. You look at some others. Bankole, at 37, he was Speaker of the Federal House of Representatives. That is not the issue. We need to have as many of our youth, our young people, we have to have women, we have to have being the physically handicapped in government, in leadership positions. But the fundamentals are there. When people are there, what are they going to do? You cannot put something on nothing. The fundamentals have to be revisited. Our problem in this country is an ideological one, and we really have to tackle this frontally before we can get anywhere.
Well, Prof, you spoke about some reactions to all of this that is happening, and to you, they seem to be pointing in certain ways. It's not new. Every time we have an issue like this, in the First Republic, you mentioned this, the reactions to the Second Republic, reactions to the 1993 annulment of the elections, reactions to 2012, complaints and stuff like that. There are always reactions. But this specific one, what does this reaction say to you about our existential challenges?
Well, the reactions have more or less shown me that we have serious problems, very serious problems, because when people are trying to react on the basis of, scrapping the surface, we need to go to what I regard as the fundamentals. In other words, when you see a situation like we are facing now, and you try to explain it by blaming it on some political leaders, one party here, one party there, and so forth, that is not the real thing. I expected that immediately these things were happening, we will have heard the political class coming together with strong groups, looking comprehensively. It is good now we are having commissions of inquiry. I hope these commissions will be wide-ranging enough, and they will expose everything. Nothing will be hidden. They bring out everything back to decades, and of course, SARS-related issues and other issues that are relevant to what caused the present problem. But religious leaders, traditional rulers, all various groups ought to have had meetings, groups, to really look into it. How do we tackle this across lines? This is not a partisan issue. It is not issues that you say is based either on religion or ethnicity and so forth. That is why I've been very worried about the various reactions. And the reactions are not genuine enough. Some are just parrying the thing. Okay, now, they are raising issues about this. Now, what do we do? Some issues, temporary measures. There are certain issues that have to be handled temporarily quite all right. Yes, immediate solutions, but then the long-term solutions are even more important, more fundamentals. It goes back to the basics. In other words, there are certain things that ought to have been done. Right now, I have been worried by the fact that not many people, just only a handful of people have been able to refer to the fact that of the various seminars, the workshops, and conferences that we have had in the past, take, for instance, the 2014 confab. There are certain recommendations made by great Nigerians, eminent Nigerians. They sat for months thinking, coming up with some solutions. Some of these things ought to have been implemented as executive orders. Some of them, of course, will have been packaged and taken to the National Assembly for solution, while some could be subject to further review. But we have left undone some of the things that we ought to have done. And the reactions are still not satisfactory. We need to wake up. The wake-up call that it represents is a very serious one. And this country, as we are now, it's as if we are still putting fire on our roofs. We need to really address those issues before we can say, yes, indeed, we are getting it right. And everybody, we shouldn't push it and say, look, it is the government, it is Buhari, it is that, and so forth. Down to the grassroots, the leaderships, at the national level, state level, local government level, and the rest of us, as individual Nigerians, we have a very serious role to play in this matter. It is our future. It is the future of our children and our grandchildren. And it is the future of our nation. What happened in the past few days, in the past 2 weeks, when we look back and see these things, we feel ashamed. Those abroad are wondering, is this the same Nigeria that they thought would be the saviors of Africa, champions of the black race? We've let them down. We can still wake up. Time is of the essence, and we should begin to act now.
Well, Prof, I'd like you to, expatiate on what you talked about when you say that the fundamental problems are there that we are not giving attention to. Because, you're not the only one that is seeing a problem that will get worse if we do not address it frontally. Ambassador John Campbell has a blog that he featured a guest columnist, Dr. Richard Joseph, who said that Nigeria is confronting what he called existential challenges. Now, you have also talked about fundamental problems that we need to address. What are these fundamental problems? And do you think the authorities today and in the past are unaware of these challenges and consequently just, flowing along?
Well, I will cite just 2 examples. You see, we have been living in denial, which is most unfortunate. The problems are there and they will never go away. Some believe that because we have some inadequacies, people are being marginalized and so forth, and then the solution is this, to their tents. You have seen so many people saying, oh, let's have this republic, let's have this, break up the country, and all that. That is not the solution. That is not the problem. The problem is very structural, the structural deformity which is, ailing us in this country. What we need to do, which we ought to have done, that could still be done, is to ensure that we have a type of structure, a framework that will make it possible for individuals as well as entities, nationalities, to actualize their potentials, to live in brotherhood, to live in an environment in which you do not, everybody will see the other as everybody's each brother, our brothers.
Pardon me, Prof. Just one moment. There was something that you said.
What you are,
Prof. Pardon me.
Yes.
There's something that you said that I think is very important that people understand. You said we have some structural deformities. Are they new? Yes. And what are these structural deformities that need to be addressed, and by whom?
That's why I kept saying that. Look, when they've been there, they are not new, but because we've been evading them, we've been running away from them, and we think they will go away. They will never go away.
What are these structural deformities?
A system in which, yes, when you have a system in which Now, you have, let's take two simple examples. You have a governor in one state, you have another one in another zone and all that and so forth. You believe that they have to be earning the same salary. Even the institutions that are existing. You have the vice chancellors of some universities and some others. You unify the structure. You do not give room for some differences in revenue generation, in some capacity to be able to carry some of those weights and so on. And then you expect that people who are in some areas, take for instance, people in the riverine areas and people in some other parts of the country, what you will require to develop will be based on some of the challenges that those people face. And when you also encourage a situation in which people have to appreciate the fact that, okay, what you bring to the table, what you are able to generate will enable you to develop, not just at your own pace, to the taste that you want. Those others too will be challenged to do the same thing. This is one country that I know in the world has no rival in terms of human and natural resources. God bless us so much. And maybe it is part of the blessings that we have in essence that is making us so misbehave. But we can utilize all this. There is no area that is not blessed. We can have a rearrangement, a type of arrangement that will make it possible. Recently, when President Buhari did something, it was part of what we have been talking about by saying that, look, local government will have their resources directly to them. The judiciary should be independent and so forth. This is just starting. These are little bits of what we've been talking about. But more fundamentally, it's not necessary for goodness sake. For states, before they can have what they call allocation, they have to come to the federal center. They are not being encouraged, being inspired to be productive. It should be done in such a way that resources generated, in other words, what you have in the federation, what you have at the list. The list, you have the supplementary list. There are two lists. The one that covers all of us as a nation, the one that is the list that only the states, the federal government handle the exclusive list. The other list, the states, okay, part of what they can key into. But the exclusive list, for goodness sake, why do we have so many things congested in that exclusive list? It should be democratized. We are not running a unitary system, and these things ought to have been looked into. The other example that I would like to state is this. We saw the way the legislative houses are being run. There is nothing wrong in State A or State B going its own way, the way it believes it has to run. If, for instance, what your state can afford does not go beyond certain levels, you do not go beyond it. You do not say because, some of these states are doing this, then you want to do it. And that is why our labor unionists, we have to go back to the drawing board and really think. It is good, solidarity, to try to do things together and so forth. But what do we profit as a nation when, because certain things are not going right, in somewhere, say, in Cross River, and then things have to be granted in Ogun State? Things are not going right in a place like, say, either in Ekiti State or in Kogi State, and people in Kaduna State or Borno State have to suffer for it. No nation is run on that premise, and we are not running a unitary system. It should not be so. These are the issues that we believe ought to be looked into. And I believe the starting point is to go to that 2014 confab.
All right, Prof. When we return, we'll take a look at what solutions, what further things should we be doing to get solutions. And then we'll highlight some reports as well, which was published earlier this year. Join us again. Welcome back. Well, Prof, there was a report that was published by a global risk firm in July this year, and it was talking about the economic impacts of COVID-19, which was going to be like a tinderbox that would drive protests, they described that as a perfect storm in many developing countries. Nigeria was one of those countries, South Africa, Algeria, Ethiopia, Congo. They listed several other countries. And then they said this was going to be in the second quarter of 2020, but that this could last for 3 years. This was as far back as in July this year, so they did all that analysis and put the report out there. Now, they equally said that this was going to inflame existing or pre-existing social inequalities, rights issues, and they were all there. So you'd have thought, these reports were out there, we should have seen this coming, even before this particular report. But you did talk about how we are responding to these things. You raised concerns about all of those. Now, given those responses that you've seen, do you get any indication that we actually do understand the problem and that we're doing something or we will do something to address them?
Well, my worry remains that our reactions, you see, COVID that you referred to earlier on, has always come, is an equal opportunity pandemic, which will have made us to do two things: address the issues of inadequacy of our medical facilities in our country, more research to be able to cope with these things, while also dealing with the immediate challenges posed. But generally, linking this up with the reaction to the existing crisis that we have on our hand, I believe that we have to be talking about solutions. And talking about solutions, the reactions make one sad in the sense that the political class is looking at it, what can my party gain out of this situation? Thinking about 2023, how do I undo my opponent and all that? That is wrong. We are not going to get anywhere. We should be looking ahead. For instance, I made reference to this issue of the structural imbalance and some of the things that have to be done. Earlier on, when I was also referring to the exclusive list and also the concurrent list, these are things to be looked into. Part of it, how do we solve this problem? I believe that going ahead, we have to look at it from at least three angles. One, at the governmental level, the executive level, what can be done to solve this problem? The fundamental issue is there, the ideological issue that I keep referring to. But for now, okay, the executive should be able to identify certain things that will have to be done. That list is there that can be implemented through executive orders. At the legislative level, the legislature should be able to look critically. What can we do with this crisis on our hand as Nigerians, as leaders, as patriots, to solve this problem now and in the future? And of course, at the individual levels, various organizations, societies, individuals should look at this. This may not have affected some people, some individuals, but at least it has affected so many people that we know. And it has affected our nation, and the future is in jeopardy. What was predicted in that report of July 2020, many of us saw it coming, and even right now, there are worse scenarios which we can only prevent from happening if we take the appropriate action. And by taking action is to look at these things fundamentally, the very root of this. We have left undone what ought to have been done. The youth is there in their millions, and no immediate palliative will solve the problem on a permanent basis. Yes, something should be done immediately. More fundamentally, certain things ought to be done beyond the visible benefits, merely distributing certain temporary palliatives and so forth. Things that will keep them busy, engaged. And between that period, between now and then, the temporary measures can be in place. But then we think, how do we get these youth to be employable? How do we get them to appreciate the fact that human life is worth of it, is worthy of protection, will not be dispensed of anyhow? How do we get them to appreciate the fact that the properties that have been born and so forth belong to them? Because of the way governance have been over the decades, people do not identify with some of those. In fact, the empathy for fellow human beings, for fellow Nigerians, have not been there the way it ought to have been there, simply because of the way the orientation had gone. We have not been able to inculcate in them that fundamental, the basics, the values. What do we now value are material things. We have become a very materialistic nation. We are not a nation that are thinking, and we should be thinking as a nation. We should be doing things that we ought to be doing, so that we know we are building the future. We are building humanity. We should center whatever we are doing around the human personality and the selfish propensities of our leaders. People now see positions as where you go to, strengthen yourself, empower yourself, materially.
Well, Prof, yeah, let me.
In a sense, you're actually destroying yourself. You are destroying the system.
Let me bring in. We've since been joined by.
We have to go back to those.
All right, bro. Pardon me. We need to bring in retired AIG Wilson in Alego. He's since joined us. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, that report I referenced did say that it was going to inflame existing grievances. So, for those who are thinking it's about 5 for 5, they have another thing coming. But in the dailies this morning, they did indicate that the presidency is worried about the continued absence of police on the streets as some of these things escalated. This is in spite of the IGP's not one, not twice, several directives that they need to get back on the streets and reclaim the spaces. What do you think is going on?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. We have, first of all, I think the Inspector General of Police and his management team, in this circumstance, are doing their best. But there's a lot. You understand that the deployment by the police have lost personnel, materials, including police stations. Notwithstanding, the police is doing everything within its power to address some of these challenges. But you will agree with me that these are no small issues. I recall yesterday I was on the line with the Commissioner of Police FCT, Balachi Roma. And while we were speaking, he had to go off the line to address to several fronts where they were having crisis. Lugbe, Idu, and a host of other places. I think from the beginning, there were issues, of course, when the end SARS protest started. But along the line, I think the police, following the directive of the Inspector General of Police, tried to regain itself after those attacks in Lagos and other places. But I can't say, all I can say is the police is fighting on many fronts, trying to restore law and order. You will agree with me that there is almost a total breakdown of law and order. And it's not going to be like a tap. You just switch on the tap, the water comes, and you just switch off the tap, the water stops.
So what does it require?
Space.
What does it require to do that?
It requires the police that I know has an operations order in place to address some of these concerns. They look at some of the flashpoints possible places that you could have this kind of flare-ups. And what they are doing, there are arrests have been made. And I think yesterday some suspects that were arrested that were engaged in looting and other criminal activities were apprehended. So I want to say that the police is responding. It could be more robust, though. Okay. But I think from what I gather, speaking to one or two commissioners of police, there is a lot on their hands. And they are deploying the police mobile force, the conventional units. But you will agree with me that conventional policing in this type of instance is quite difficult. But let me tell you one thing. I think we should, in addition to law enforcement action, I think we need to also do, maybe talk about communication with the youths, with the public. And in doing that, the police, supported by other organizations, will do this.
Okay.
Because
well, Mr. Anogu, just one moment. Let me ask you something, because there seems to be a background. Just one moment. There seems to be a background to this that we may be missing out on. 4 times in 4 years, the IG have banned or asked that SARS men be reformed, be reorganized, and all of that. 4 times. And 4 times it didn't happen until this last time, when they had to be disbanded. Now, the SARS were under certain levels of authority before eventually the IG said, under my direct authority, with an AIG right there in Abuja. What happened to that chain of command that did not obey the order of the IG then, and even the current IG, the first time and the second time that he prescribed or asked that SARS be reorganized? That didn't happen. That you think if the IG just speaks now, when you say that the youth should be educated about the functions of the police, that the youths or anyone in Nigeria will even believe that it's going to happen, because it's happened before that the police have flouted the order of the IG.
Yeah, let me say something. Indeed, there were instances that SARS, there were attempts to disband and proscribe SARS. But what's my appeal to the public, and the youth in particular, that SARS is gone for good, and judicial panels of inquiry are sitting in the various states to address the grievances of youths and other Nigerians that have complaints.
Mr. Anogu, I'm sorry, SARS. It doesn't seem like you are really answering my question. Just one moment. You're not answering my question.
No, I'm coming to a point.
Okay, please go ahead.
So, what I appeal is for the public to have confidence in the Director of the Inspection of Police and the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that SARS has been disbanded. Let me tell you, give you a little background. SARS is just an investigation unit. Unfortunately, some of their activities went overboard. That's not a lie. That's not a lie. But the point is this: you are still going to be dealing with violent crimes, armed robbery, kidnapping, banditry, and the rest of them. And so, the structure of the police, there is, when they are talking about reformation of the police, is going to be a kind of altering some of the present arrangement to place a structure that will address the concerns of Nigerians. And when you have an investigation unit, even before SARS came to be in 1992 or even 84, the traditional CID has a section on dealing with anti-robbery. It was not special anti-robbery, because you have anti-fraud, anti-human trafficking, and the rest of them. Unfortunately, because of the violent crimes, SARS assumed a prominent position. But the point I'm trying to say is to assuage the grievances of the public that SARS has been disbanded and SARS will not come back. And that the Nigeria police will, continue to comply with international best practices, respect for human rights. Because in dealing with the issues like this, you talk about the structure. We have had issues, the training schools, because everything that is happening, fundamentally, I believe, is from training. Because if you go to Enugu Police
Mr. Anoligu, just one moment, Mr. Anoligu, just one moment.
You know that it's not...
Can you just why was the IGP's orders so many times disregarded by men whose job is to obey orders?
The question, my answer to that is that no police officer of any rank from constable to DIG can disobey the Inspector General of Police without consequences.
So what was the consequence those 4 times? Yes. Just one moment, because we need to visit the past to ensure that it doesn't repeat itself. That's the mistake we have made over time. Now, it has happened. SARS has been disbanded. SWAT is coming up. What's the assurance we have that SWAT will not become SARS, and then there will be another call for end SWAT? So what has been done to those people who flouted the orders of various levels of authority in the hierarchy of the police over the years? What should be done to them to ensure that this does not happen again?
My simple answer to that is, my understanding and what in the conferences I've attended with the Inspector General of Police, I know that SARS has been reorganized. A commissioner of police deployed to coordinate activities of SARS. What I understand is that SARS initially were removed from state commands and put under the direct command of a commissioner of police in the force headquarters to coordinate activities. When that was seen not to be producing effect, they were again sent back that the commissioners of police in commands should assume responsibility of supervision and direction of SARS. But that in the present circumstance, where the IG and the presidency has said that SARS has been disbanded, such a clear-cut directive, in my opinion, has just been issued. But what has been happening has been reorganization of SARS, bring them from state, okay, now we are one commissioner of police in Abuja to coordinate them, or commissioners of police in states to command them. But in the present, and then again, in uniform, that you don't go, and one uniform was designed for them to wear, and there were issues like that. But a clear statement that we are the police is doing away with SARS, I think that pronouncement has just been made in clear terms.
Let me jump in, Mr. Nalego.
I don't see any...
Yeah, just hang on a minute. Moving forward now, people want change. 2 things that we've noticed is that, look, the senior police officers who are in the offices, well behaved. But the people, the policemen that people meet on a daily basis on the streets, there are huge question marks about how a lot of them conduct themselves. Can there be the kind of change that people expect, given that the police, you still have the same people there, the same training that they've had, and if certain things are not done properly in terms of that relations on the streets, it could inflame further passion. Can we get the change when they get back to the streets?
That is clear. There will be changes. But let me give you one background. You are not privy to some of the inner workings of the place. But I tell you that on a daily basis, on a regular basis, officers either in SARS, in operations, in administration, those on patrol on the beat, are being disciplined. Many are being reduced in rank, and some are being outrightly dismissed. But going forward, what I want to say is to see police officers on our streets connecting with the public. Not just going on patrols, but having that connection with the public and bridging that gap. That means if I am on patrol, the patrol officer will stop to interact, to ask the situation around that environment and find a means where that member of the public can reach them. Because that if we don't close that gap, it is going to be a problem. And I will also recommend that perhaps it's time for the Nigeria Police Force to consider setting up professional standards units to monitor the conduct of officers. Monitoring units and all that, but we kind of have professional standards and then having in that place monitoring and evaluation, empowering the Assistant Inspector General, zonal Assistant Inspector Generals of Police, giving them the resource to monitor activities within their zone. And then having the research and planning unit, or in the administration unit.
All right, we'll come back to this.
Professional standards.
Some just think that
what is important now is
some think this is papering over cracks. But don't worry, we'll still come back to you. But let me bring in Professor Adeniro on this one, because there are many who think that there's got to be a fundamental change to the structure of policing in this country. In fact, lately, that conversation popped up again about state police, to be or not to be for you.
Well, I believe one of the issues that really need to be addressed now is the need to activate this police community relations program to ensure that the people are carried along there. But more fundamentally, there is need to have a holistic approach at the structure of the police. We cannot leave the security of this country just to the police, the regular police. The number is limited, that's one. Of course, there is also need for increased professionalism, all those things. But meanwhile, the people also have to be carried along. In terms of community policing, which people have been advocating, I think this is within the framework of what I said earlier on. In other words, that we have to have a holistic approach. Let Mr. President, as part of the solutions to what we are trying to do, go back and take that 2014 confab recommendations and look at how this could be implemented. Those that can be implemented without really going through the legislature, those that need to go to the legislature, let it go there, because some of these issues are already addressed there. We cannot afford a nation that is not only under-policed, but is not mindful of the challenges that we are now facing, because we know the report of July 2020 is not just a fluke, it is real. And we should not wait until we now have another firefighting approach. We should look at it holistically and realize that indeed we have to look at this issue. And mind you, one other factor, one issue that really also has to be addressed, we shouldn't overlook, is the fact that something precipitated what we are now discussing. The youth leadership, resourceful as they are, as we have seen, should be brought in. Let the government sit with them, discuss with them their input beyond these inquiries that are set up, this commission of inquiries. Beyond that, they need to have some input into the unfolding resolution of the crisis, because they are part of the problem, they are also part of the solution. They did not create the problem, we created the problem for them.
All right.
But since they have appreciated the need to challenge, to solve, to liberate themselves, let them be part of that solution to the liberation.
Okay, well, we'll come back in a moment, and then we'll get our closing thoughts. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Prof, could you go ahead and, so moving forward now, what kind of steps should we be taking such that we are addressing this problem, at least fundamentally?
Yeah. Right, yeah. We cannot we should admit that we cannot be using the mindset of the 20th century to solve the problem of the 21st century. That is why I was saying that even the youth, the young ones, should be brought in to tap from their resourcefulness in terms of finding permanent solution to this. We have a system when we implement, let's say, community policing. We have a system in which the type of training that will be required, the structure that will enable that training to be given and so forth, we have really not looked into that. A lot is going on in the world out there that will require that we give in more to our police, incentives, training, and of course, the technology that will be required to properly police a population that is as expansive as we are in this country. And more importantly, it is also important that we factor in the community component of the policing system. You and I, and of course, various parents, individuals, and so on, and community development associations, different groups, we have to be involved in this. It isn't the man in uniform alone that will handle the challenges that we are facing right now. We need to address this issue. And of course, while we are also doing that, we have to be mindful that, look, no matter what we do, if we do not train those children, if we do not bring them up properly, we are wasting our time. It is that fundamental training, the basics, upon which we are going to base whatever else we do. That is the people that will now be policed later on. In fact, they themselves will be part of the policing system without necessarily wearing the uniform, because they will have appreciated the values of living and the values of development and, of course, of nationhood.
Well, Prof, just one more thing on that one. You have, a few times you've talked about the youths. And you've referenced some past leaders that we have who, well, some of them still in leadership, who started as much younger people than they are now over the past 20 years. Now, how do you think we can begin to bring the young people in? Because you know as well as everyone does that they are in the majority as far as the voting population is concerned. Some of them feel that the political structure is skewed against them. How do we begin to engineer this system to factor them in, even from this very moment, constitution or no constitution?
Well, thank you very much. Our leadership recruitment process is very flawed. And some of what we have been doing over the years, people look at, instead of headhunting, there are two ways of looking at it. One is this headhunting, bringing the very bright and the brightest, and try to encourage them to play certain key roles and so forth. At the same time, there is a general one that no matter where you are going in the system, because you are going to function within the system anyway, you will have gone through some orientation that will make you function to defend the flag to the very end, to know that once you are defending the nation, you are defending yourself, and by defending yourself, that defense will mean equipping yourself with adequate knowledge, with the capacity to be able to perform in any society. That is part of it. There are certain institutions which exist now. Some were existing in the past. They phased them out, which will enable the individual to know what roles to play in the political process. I wonder sometimes what political parties are doing when they exist without a very functional institutes, which will enable them to take their
Prof,
members,
if you could respond to
those holding positions, those not holding positions.
If you could respond to this in about 60 seconds, so we can move to Mr. Analogu. Prof, just a minute, because
Yes.
if our leadership recruitment process is flawed, can we expect people
Yes.
who emerged from a flawed leadership recruitment process to do something about our poor education system, given how much we spend abroad for education?
Never. Never. You cannot put something on nothing. You cannot put something on nothing. That is why I keep talking about going back to the fundamentals. What we now have is that the pool, the army of the young that we have, the leaders have turned them to a resource from which they recruit people as part of those to be used as the election rigging machine. And of course, because these people also do not know that they are mortgaging their own future, that they are destroying their own future, that they are destroying their own careers, and of course, making sure that the system replicates itself.
All right.
Giving us that flawed system unless and until it is changed fundamentally. And it can only be changed through two ways. One, I have mentioned this structural rearrangement in such a way that we micromanage some of these things. Then the second one, of course, is that at the national level, there have to be leadership reorientation. The ideological issue cannot be run away from. We cannot run away from it. And when those people to give it do not even have it, it means that we have a fundamental problem, which will have to be revisited. And this is calling upon those people who are worried, who are concerned,
Okay.
to
All right,
go
Prof.
beyond what the ethnic, attractions, religious, appeals, and all that, and so forth, and focus on the ideological. That
right.
would
So-
serve as the key to open up the gate,
Mr.
to
Naligu,
reposition in this country, and to moving us forward.
all right, Prof. Mr. Naligu, we, unfortunately, police stations were razed, police officers were caught in the fray, with armory looted, but we also have heard, reported out there as well, the directives from the presidents to do something about the salary structure or scale of police officers in the country. What kind of impact is that going to have? Will it change anything in terms of the conduct of policemen? Because when you speak about that change, we also have to put into consideration the fact that many of those in police today were those who came through politicians, those recommendations. So what kind of change can we really get?
Thank you very much. I want to start my remark by saying that the police is a very essential institution in any country. The welfare of the police has a significant role even in their service delivery. Somebody should be well remunerated so that he knows that if I lose this job, I've lost so much. And I believe very strongly that if we equip our police force, if we take care of their welfare, it's going to impact directly, and especially their training. Good salary, good welfare, especially training. I just make this passionate appeal. Let our training institutions be taken care of.
All right.
Because a man that is properly trained, a man that is properly given the proper good welfare, has no choice but to perform.
All right, Mr. Naligu,
Let me
now,
give you
pardon me,
example.
on that direct, okay, go ahead with the example. But briefly, please, so we can wind down.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask that the
Oh,
directive
so,
that the
on the
IGP
directive-
gave, no, the directive that the IGP gave about withdrawing police officers or police personnel from VIPs, it's not the first. We know the former IGP, even previous ones have said the same thing. But fundamental to that is that, look, the service they provide for those VIPs are paid for. So that's always a challenge, because how are they going to, is that even going to work in the first place?
I spoke at a forum, and I said that that directive is very timely and must be enforced. I think what we need to do, I'm happy that the new Police Act made provision for private investigators. in that, going forward on that, I want to also align myself with the position that we should look at some of our private security companies, look at 1, 2, 3, and empower them so that those who feel they need to be, they need extra protection, that the general security is not enough, might be they can avail themselves of such service so that these officers who are withdrawn will increase the manpower resource of the Nigeria Police Force.
All right.
Yes, there are those that are entitled, that they can be kept. But I think the directive that the IG gave, I will align with him and urge the management team to also see that this directive is complied with. The situation.
Well, the thing is,
from what my observation, from what is going on.
Yeah. Okay. Just conclude on that. Then we'll just go on.
From what is going on, the police management team doesn't just have any choice.
Okay.
But to ensure that they draw personnel and have a critical mass that can address some of these concerns.
All right, Mr. Nalego, but you know,
So
the immediate concerns
I
will
think
be,
that directive
if it worked before, why did they have to issue the directive again? Food for thought. But we thank you very much indeed, retired AIG Wilson Inalegu, as well as Professor Tunde Adeniro OFR, former Minister of Education and former ambassador to Germany. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on today.